great for wintertime reading, which we're almost done with. So, let's see. I want to get a quick show of hands. Who is a farmer in the room? Okay, nice, about half. More than half. Who is a gardener, a home gardener? Okay, you. And landscapers? Nice. Okay, great. So you should all find something to take away from today. Um, First, I want to start off with my story because I think you'll understand why I'm so passionate about soil because of where I've come from. And the best way is to go back about 13 years. I was diagnosed as bipolar, and I did everything I was supposed to do for 10 years. So I took all the medication, I did all the therapy, and I saw the doctors religiously, and I came to a place where I wasn't sick, but I wasn't healthy. So I was in this place of what I like to call non-sickness. I was, I was, um, I was getting by, but I wasn't happy, and so I wanted to be happy. So I went to my doctor, who I really respected, and I asked him, when, when do I get off medication? When do I get better? And he said, you don't. You get worse over time, and your medication is going to have to increase over time, and then there could even be a time when it doesn't work anymore. Or if you ever decide to get off of it, you might never be able to find a medication that would save you from your mental illness. So I was thinking, this is okay. He's got a good return customer going. But other than that, I wanted to know more about how the medication works. So the medication I was on, I did research, and there's not much out there. It was actually kind of anecdotal. The medication was used for epilepsy at high doses, and then it was anecdotally found to keep mood at bay at low doses. So to me, that didn't resonate in my gut as a great solution for health, and I wanted to know more. So I got a lead from an unlikely source, a doctor who didn't necessarily believe in what I was searching for, but he had found an article 10 years back, and he saved it. He's a collector, and so he saved it, and he gave it to me, and he said, yeah, take a look into this. And it was more about mental health than mental illness. And so it was about a Mormon community who lost one of the women to suicide in their community, and they're a Mormon farming community, and they knew that when their cattle had become unmanageable, they took a look at what was different in their relationship with the cattle, and so they looked at lifestyle, they looked at diet, and they looked at nutrition, and they felt that there could have been more work with their nutrition. They weren't sure what was going on there, and they put in a mineral supplement program for their cattle. Their cattle mellowed down, and so they used this same sort of uneducated, it's not school taught, the same principle to think about why might the woman have committed suicide, why would one of these mothers have committed suicide. And so they thought maybe her health wasn't there. And so they looked into it, and they found out that there's been a lot of work done on human nutrition, and they worked with a doctor, and they found what was missing in this woman's diet, or what they thought might be missing in her diet, and they put together a mineral supplement that was broad spectrum and had great nutrition in it, and they worked with this doctor, and they found that they could transition people off medication with this supplement. And so when I read about this, my ears perked up, and it got me thinking that maybe there's more to my disease. Maybe there's something I can do. And so I started researching more about health, and I looked into this company. They're very approachable. They wrote me back. They called me. We emailed, and I bought 2 of these bottles, and I had them sitting for about 6 months on my counter. Like, okay, when am I going to do this? You can't just jump into getting off your medication, because we all know that doesn't a lot of what I'll teach you today has been taught to me, and the reason it resonates with me so much is because Dan talked about doing a soil test, finding out what is in the soil, using a soil mineral balance that has been studied for years, and putting that in place, and not adding anything extra. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Each system is different, and that really resonated with me because what I was about to step into was a one-size-fits-all supplement. And so it probably had some great attributes to it, but what Dan was saying made more sense. And then I was lucky enough to meet his mom, and she was already doing hair testing. And so that is when it's basically the equivalent of soil testing. And you take a hair test, you find out what your mineral levels are, and then you can add in a supplement, a tailored supplement of just what you need. And so you can get your nutritional foundation where it should be, where people know humans perform and are happy and healthy. So, um, uh, long story short, I met the same woman that the nutritionalist that Julie Rawson worked with. I got a hair test. I figured out where I was. We talked about the medication I was on. We figured out a plan for me transitioning off and the diet and the lifestyle changes that I would have to make. And it's been 2 years, and I've been off medication, and I've have been symptom free, and not only symptom free, the pleasure is now I feel like I'm coming into my own, and I'm speaking, which I would have never done, and I am volunteering. I do a lot of volunteering in the community, and I feel like me having gotten my foundation has then allowed me to be a part of the world. So that is where my passion for soil comes from, because if you put the nutrition in the soil, then you start to put the nutrition in the food, and then you get that nutrition in your body. And right now, currently, I'm doing a lot of research. So I am fortunate to still live with my parents, which most people would think is unfortunate, but I have great rent that way, and I can put a lot of time into doing research and growing experiments, and here today talking to you about consulting. So that's also what I do. And one other thing is that this has allowed me to practice medicine without a license. So I can put the nutrition in the soil and not feel and know the results will come. So just real quick, I want to run through where I came from. I met my wife in New York, and we were growing in our little New York City, Brooklyn backyard in raised beds because we soil tested and it was too high in lead. And so we quickly maxed out of that area. We came to my parents, and we asked if we could tear up the lawn and plant about a half-acre vegetable garden. And this is maybe a year after this picture. And then we started growing so much food that we needed to start to do something with it. So I'm sorry this is a little dark, a little washed out, but this was all buckthorn, and then my dad built us a little farm stand, so we sell the extra produce there. We also take care of other people's vegetable gardens, and we love our animals, and we wish we had more space for more animals. Okay, so here is where I sell you on why you're here today. So the benefits of soil mineral balance, super nutrition. So all of these will sort of come to light more as I present what I'm going to present. So the potential for super nutrition from our food. So if we're going to be eating from our gardens and our farms, we can feel like we can put the most into that food. Soil building, carbon sequestration. I'm going to show how putting the proper mineral balance in place will allow you to build more carbon in your soil. Increase diversity of life and the amounts of life. So when you have the balance, life will come. It's like it's that movie, if you build it, they will come. You build the mineral foundation, and you'll have the biology start to perform because you're giving them the tools they need to perform. Increased yields, shelf life, taste, better air, water quality, infiltration, healthier animals, plants, and people, much less disease. over time, and less dependence on inputs, so less nitrogen. So we're building health into the system so you don't have to be there managing and adding more every year. And then with that comes increased beauty, and because some of us have to make money, increased consumers, because they'll be coming back for that taste. Okay, so where do we begin? We begin with intention. None of this will work if your heart is not in it. So you have to want this paradigm to start to happen in your own life. To start to think about why we're here, why we're managing land, and then because this is a complicated process, things start to fall into place when your intention is there, and things start to happen. So humility. That same root shows up in human, it shows up in humus. Humus is the carbon in the soil, and so at that root, the hum means of and for the earth. So that's where we want to be. We want to be grounded, and we want to be in the system. Okay. So I am only talking about one small piece of the puzzle today. There's so much more that can happen on your farm or your landscape or your garden to improve health. But I'm just talking about fertility, and that is this one little wedge. You can, these are just my factors I put together, but quality of life is really important, location management, design, and fertility. But we're just looking at one little slice, and then within that slice, these are the parameters of fertility. So we have the physical structure, the biology, and the chemistry. And we are going to only look today mostly at the chemistry, the mineral makeup that allows this system to perform. So there are many other factors. The soil food web people would say optimize this area and you'll be on your way. I'm in this direction. This is where I came from. So this is what I'm speaking to. There's some great work with permaculture, which overlaps a lot of these, and you can increase a lot of these, and we'll touch briefly on that at the end. Okay, so what is fertility? Fertility is a balance of humus, minerals, air, water, energy, and light. As growers, we have the fertilizer, and then we have the minerals. And the fertilizer is the crop needs, or the critical points of influence when you need to get that plant the nutrition it needs to perform. And then we have the foundation. So the foundation is the minerals that allows the system to provide more for itself. So a really good way to think about this is when you optimize your own gut health, you get more from your food, you get more from you get more nutrition in that way. The soil is the gut of the plant, and so when we're building nutrition, we're making it available to the soil, and the soil food web delivers it to the plant. So the microbes work it over, and they'll deliver it to the plant. Okay, where do minerals come from? So minerals are natural. We've known for a long time that there are more fertile places than others. So some places have the glacier runoff, so maybe some of us have heard of the Hunza Valley people who are known for their longevity, and they have this beautiful society tucked away over a 13,000-foot pass in Pakistan. And so how do these people have this beautiful self-contained fertility? And some people say it has a lot to do with the glaciers that sit above this community, and what runs off of these mineral-rich glaciers is something called glacier milk, and they drink it, and they water their fields with it, and it's a very broad spectrum, highly available mineral source. Then we have floods, and the Nile was Egypt was built from the fertility of the Nile, and the Nile would flood annually and spread all that fertility out in the fields, and the Egyptians would then work the fields. Volcanoes. Italy is known for great wine, and that has a lot to do with that volcano. Wind spreads dust and fine particles and builds soil, so our plains were built that way. Plate movement in the Connecticut River Valley. There's a vein of basalt that is mostly used for road construction, but it's actually a very mineral-rich deposit. Parent rock. This gentleman is going to be coming to our area probably going to be speaking. He's a geologist turned farmer, and when he would go prospecting on these big with these big mining companies, he'd fly in helicopters over the Canadian forests for hours at a time. And when they would notice places in the forest of more vibrancy, more health, they would know that there was mineral deposits underneath that stretch of forest. And unfortunately, they would mine it. But we can use that knowledge to know that then fertility has a role on the environment. And then obviously life accumulates minerals. The diatomaceous earth cliffs of Maryland and Delaware, these huge white cliffs, are just the accumulations of these microscopic diatoms, which are calcium rich, and they build up over time, and then we spread a little bit of that diatomaceous earth to kill bugs or to act as like a little flea repellent on our dogs. And then the ocean is the source of everything. It has 99.9% of all the minerals. Okay. So where did this balance come from? We have Professor William Albrecht to thank. And so he was around in the 30s, and he took every mineral combination there was and found out which mineral balance grew the healthiest plants. And so Balanced Land Health manages about 16 minerals for health. Professor William Albrecht used over that many, and so you have to think of each mineral, each combination, trying to figure out what balance gave the best yields. And so after years and years of all these different trials, he came up with the best mineral balance. And at the same point in time, well, a little before him, von Liebig ashed plants. He burned them, and he said, well, it's mostly just nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And so he figured by that reasoning, that's all that the plant needed to grow. And so after World War II, we had all this infrastructure to produce synthetic chemicals. So they needed something to do. And when they found this simplified version of fertility, which said it's just N, P, and K, they said, we can do this. We have all this machinery that we use to build synthetic chemicals from the war. We can just transfer our momentum to produce NPK. And so that got carried away. Then Professor William Albrecht's work got lost in the mix. And so people didn't understand that there's this beautiful balance that this dedicated scientist produced. And he was eventually fired from Missouri because they felt he wasn't producing something they could make a profit from. And so now he then went on to do some amazing work to prove to people how important this balance was. And he looked at draft records for World War I, and he found that there was locations where whole areas were having boys get turned down from the war. And he wondered why it was, and they were coming back with flat feet and dental problems. And then he overlaid the soil maps on top of those draft maps that where people were getting not accepted for the war, and he found out that the fertility that those boys ate from, because back in World War I, a lot of people were eating from the land they grew up on, affected their health. And so the people who weren't going to war were the people who were eating from poor soils. And he was the first to really hammer home this theory that disease, weeds, insects, and all pathogens are signs of imbalance. Once you manage for balance, then these guys disappear. And I hope to show you more of that as we go. Okay, so this is Mulder's chart, and this applies to humans as well as soil. And I don't want you to go away with all these interactions and how which mineral is connected to which mineral, but I just want you to see how connected each mineral is. So a take one of these away, for a little while the system will sort of run and sort of get by, but when you start messing up this balance, the whole ecosystem falls apart. And what I've noticed with soil is once you start managing for that balance, uh, a lot of things start to, a lot of momentum starts to get built into the system. So, what are some of the benefits of minerals? So each element has countless relationships with plant health. These are just a few, but calcium in the eco-growing world is considered the king. It plays a huge role in the cell walls of plants. All microbes have their protoplasm made out of a calcium component, so it's really important to the relationship with microbes. Nitrogen, we all know, builds proteins. Sulfur, in a relationship of 1 to 10 with nitrogen, also builds proteins and this plant secondary metabolites, and that's like if you crush garlic or onion, you get that sulfur smell. That's easy to tell in those, but all plant secondary metabolites, a lot of plant secondary metabolites have a sulfur component. Magnesium is the center of the chlorophyll molecule, so you have a complex organic chemistry model surrounded by a magnesium atom. So you need that magnesium for photosynthesis, and that's what a lot of us are here today to optimize is photosynthesis. Potassium is helps with fruiting, with sugar translocation, with bark strength. Manganese is in seed formation, and I was just looking at an email today talking about the seedless watermelon, and one grower scientist hypothesis about why the seedless watermelon is seedless is because it has been bred to have a manganese deficiency. And so when you have no manganese, you have no seed formation. And so that bodes well for maybe our tastes, our aesthetics, but it doesn't bode well for our nutrition because we need a certain amount of manganese too. But hey, we're not living off of watermelon. So like I said before, boron is considered the calcium trucker. It delivers calcium. Zinc is involved with growth hormones and phosphorus uptake. Copper is involved in lignin formation, which then is antifungal because fungus is its role is breaking apart that tough material that other microbes can't work on. And so when you strengthen that tough material, the lignin, then you're basically getting an antifungal response. But a lot of people also use it as a dust. Phosphorus is involved with ATP, which the biochemist will tell you is the energy currency of the cell. So that's a huge energy area for plants and also animals. Molybdenum is a trace element. You only need a tiny bit of it, but it helps with nitrogen formation. Iron assists with chlorophyll. Sodium, you even need a little bit of sodium. Selenium, iodine, yeah, that equals better farmers because when it's in the food, then we get it in our diet. And then there's traces, and cobalt is vitamin B12, which is essential for us also. Okay, so this I don't want you to try to figure out what my plant has by which deficiency, but I want you to know that a lot of people symbolize what is going on with minerals by thinking of a barrel with different heights of the staves. These are called staves, these little wooden planks. It took me a while to learn that. But so wherever the lowest stave is, that's where the water runs out. So where our deficiency is, that is the limit of the health of our system. So if we're growing in an area that leaches a lot of the anions, like the Northeast, then our stave is those leached anions. Okay, so why has it always been, we already covered this, why has it always been NPK driven or compost driven, our mentality, and we never really heard of Albrecht? We covered von Liebig. And then Rodale came along and was mostly only concerned with compost and management. And so optimizing the farm through management and compost, but not taking a closer look at the nutrition. He felt that compost delivered everything. It was broad spectrum. You didn't need to worry about it. Actually, compost has a really high potassium component, which is great to replace potassium deficiencies in those situations where you're growing a lot of fruiting crops. But compost can get you out of balance. So there was a backlash recently by Steve Solomon, who's the founder of Territorial Seeds. And Steve said, I've been going to all these conferences for years, and I've been taking people aside who do the same thing I did, which was grow my own food and eat from my own garden. And I was asking him, is your health not doing as good as you think it would be? We're supposed to be the healthiest people. We're growing our own food. And he's like, I'm having teeth problems. He was grown in the Northwest. And the Northwest, like the Northeast, does not have the best fertility base. And so he was running up into health problems, and he didn't really find an outlet to talk about it in public because people, you're doing the brave farmer thing. You don't want to question if it's all there. And so he wrote The Intelligent Gardener, which I got through about half of it, and then I got a little turned off. But I liked the point that he was coming out and saying, I came from this compost-driven mentality, that all I thought you needed was what you could build yourself, and now I'm starting to think that there's a lot more to plant health and human health. So the great mineral debate. I've come across I just came across a really inspiring speaker, Mark Shepard, and him and I got to talk a little bit about, are minerals even necessary? And I was enlightened by his approach, his take. And basically, his take is he's a permaculture guy, and he's doing it on a farm scale, and we'll see a little bit more from him later. But he basically said that the more you get your ecosystem in relationship with nature, the less inputs you need. So that up here at this apex of needed inputs would be something like our conventional farming right now. So our conventional farming right now, we need companies to make synthetic fertilizer. We need scientists to engineer genes into our crops. We need a whole fabric of companies and supports to support that food growing system. And then we're only growing annual crops, which nature sees annual crops maybe 2% of the time in the wild. And so this system is very far removed from nature. In nature, we don't have scientists and we don't have GMOs and all that. So you need a lot of inputs. As you get closer, you need less. So what I want you guys to take away here is that I don't think any of us are here yet. But I would hope we all get to this place. And then I'll be out of a job. But until then, I'm here to do some consulting with the growing systems and to help you get your growing systems up, because we can put in place some of the fertility until our design catches up with nature. And okay, so the proof of concept. So one nice proof of concept is Roundup, is actually using something that I would never suggest using and understanding how it works, and then we can understand why it's so important to build nutrition into our system. So chelation means a claw. You grab something, you chelate it. So the way Roundup works is you spray it on a plant and it chelates the essential minerals of the plant. And Roundup doesn't kill the plant. This slide right here is over here, no Roundup sprayed on C, Roundup sprayed, and then Roundup sprayed in a sterile medium. So no, in a sterile environment. So this one is not dead. What Roundup does is, by taking the essential minerals from the plant is now exposed to a universal soil pathogen called Fusarium. And Fusarium delivers the death blow. So what you're left with is the only plants that don't die from Roundup are Roundup ready plants that have been engineered to be able to be sprayed by Roundup, and then when Fusarium comes to attack them, in the genes, they have something that kills the Fusarium. So they have nothing that puts the nutrition back in, which was taken out by Roundup, and they don't have anything to put the nutrition in from the actual gene modification, which actually takes energy from the plant. But the plant lives, and what we're left with is skeletal nutrition. So that plant has been 90% reduced from the Roundup, 90% reduced from the actual modification of the plant. And so and then we can thank Roundup for actually showing us how nutrition works, because then when we build the nutrition into the system, we are then resilient against pathogens. So now, enough gloom and doom. What is a healthy plant? And a healthy plant is a wormhole. So a wormhole is, we've all maybe seen those pictures of a black hole, which takes in energy from this giant funnel and then puts it out somewhere else in the universe in another place and spreads it all out. So a wormhole is catching sunlight and catching earth energy and transferring it down into the roots. So 60% of a healthy plant's total photosynthetic carbon is delivered to the roots. So this means that if you have a half a pound piece of plant above ground and a half a pound piece of plant below ground, which is the normal average in relationship with roots to stem, then you would have a total of 1 pound. And over the growing season, that plant, if it's healthy, would have left 2.3 pounds of carbon in the soil in the form of sugars. So these are all sugar molecules right here. This is our wormhole, and I put microbes on the back of some of these people, and they're delivering the nutrients. So the microbes get these sugars from the plant. The plant is just dumping sugars, and we know anytime you have sugars, you're getting biology happening, whether you like it or not. And the biology is happening, and the plant is trading all this carbon. The plant, a healthy plant, is a gift to the environment. And so what we're trying to do here is figure out how to optimize that health, because then we're building health into our system long term. Okay, so what programs do I offer? Testing, soil testing, and then in season we'll do crop testing. I am a source for minerals. I can help with application, database management. For some of the high-end growers, we're doing foliar nutrition, which you can actually build the nutrition right into the plant with a foliar tray. And this is the same rock powders that I use into the soil, but they're micronized, and they come with a biological package that ignites them on the leaf surface, and then nutrition can go right in through the plant. So we can do an in-season test, find a deficiency, and then apply what is needed to get that plant out of that. Then we offer management. We carry tiny meal products, which are enzymes and microbes. And the 10% rule is a rule that I didn't follow, but I probably should have, which is just start with 10%. If you're learning something new, a great way to try it out is to try 10% on your area. And if it works, then you scale up. Instead of putting the whole farm in a management jeopardy by trying something new, I just suggest stay with 10%. If it works, then take it further. So the Northeast, what does it look like? We have high rainfall, where there is no such thing as a climax species, but what our areas tend to head towards is forest and scrub. We're kind of lower temperatures, thin, rocky soils. We're low in minerals here, but we're information rich. We have classes like this happening. What do I suggest for a fertility program for the Northeast? This is going to keep coming back around. This is the permaculture design component. Add more growing layers to cycle and hold nutrition. So that's adding animals to your system, adding more layers. This is silvopasture here, which we were lucky at the Northeast Organic Farming Conference to hear more about how silvopasture works. It's basically putting trees in your pasture and running livestock through, and so you get the benefit of, you could have a crop up here, and then you could have a crop, your livestock could be a crop down here, so you could have a nut orchard with livestock underneath. And then, so what do I suggest? We add the missing base minerals over time as budget allows, whether it's your landscape project, so you would have less weeds, or whether it's your vegetable garden or your farm. And then if we're taking crops away, we'll want to add in just a tiny bit every year for what was removed. So if we're taking tomatoes off our property that are high in potassium, we want to add a little bit of what's been removed to cover the removal rates. And then if we're really into it, we can do these foliar sprays. I have a gas-powered foliar sprayer that looks like Ghostbusters, and you can actually cover a large area with whatever nutrition that you want to put in there. Some great ones are products coming from the ocean, micronized seaweeds or some fermented fertilizers. Okay, so just to repeat, we're going to optimize the wormhole effect with pests, and these are our goals: nutrition, taste, shelf life, disease, insect resistance. Over here, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with these $80,000 or 80,000 yen, sorry, not dollar, vegetables that they sell in Japan. So a lot of our nutrient dense, which that's what I'm calling this approach, nutrient dense growers sell their products to Japan because Japan has the metrics for understanding what they're actually looking at. A lot of times our farmers won't get paid a premium for quality, but Japan is a market where you can get a premium for the nutrition, and these look like works of art. They look fake, but they have super high standards, and they're hooked up with our growers. Okay, so we're not going to get too in depth in interpreting a soil test. That is another class, but we can walk through a couple of the parameters and take a look at a few things. From here, you're not going to be able to notice any numbers, but what you do notice is there's a lot of numbers on there. And so the soil test I recommend gives you a lot to work with. Whereas UMass, you might only get NPK and calcium, but or you actually get a few more, but the recommendations they're only giving you in NPK and calcium. But over here, this is my garden when I first started, and my calcium levels were horrible. My potassium levels were not good. My magnesium levels were not good, and I should have put it up here, but now my current one, and I'll show you a slide of what I did in my where I got my soil test to be. I was so confident that I planted goutweed in it to show people that goutweed just doesn't take over anywhere. Goutweed has a foundation that it wants to colonize, and if you get that balance in place, you don't get the rapid invasive plant. So, okay, so one of the first numbers up there was cation exchange capacity, CEC, and basically that means what kind of gas tank does your soil have? How much work can it do? So you have clay soils and you have sandy soils on the spectrum. And clay holds a lot of minerals. It has all these what are called exchange sites, and it can hold minerals. It can only hold positive, the positive cations, positively charged minerals, and humus also has a very high CEC like this. So those rich dark soils, humus can hold anions and cations. That's both negatively charged minerals and positively charged. So and so both of these systems can grow healthy food. It just takes a different management approach. So with a sandy soil, you have to spoon feed the nutrition in. You can't put it all in once, or you're going to lose your money because you'll put all that nutrition out there, and it just washes right through the system. So with a clay soil, sometimes it's too expensive to balance the minerals because the clay foundation is actually throwing the balance off. In Canada, I visited some farms that were on all calcium carbonate soils, and so that sends the calcium level through the roof. And when I show you a little bit later what calcium level we're managing for, there would be no way on earth that they could get their soil into balance. But what they do is they just add enough in the season to manage for that balance. And you manage for the balance in the growing area as opposed to that subsoil, which you're never going to change. It's thick, thick calcium. Okay, so a lot of times people say, well, what about the pH model? Why don't you just manage your soil based on pH? And pH does have a relationship with mineral availability. But if you look right here, right around 6.4, you get almost the most amount of concentration of minerals available. And the ones that you don't, the calcium magnesium, in the model that I propose, you manage for those in higher quantities so that you don't have to be in a pH range, a more neutral pH range, to have those be available. So a lot of times I tell people pH is the silhouette of the minerals. So I can change pH with something that's not necessarily good for a plant. When people say, oh, that plant can't grow in acidic conditions, you have to raise the pH. Well, you can use salt, you can use sodium to raise the pH, and that does not mean that is what the plant needs. So when we start managing for the mineral balance, the pH follows, and you don't have to worry about the pH. And we'll see another example of that later. Okay, so what is the balance? The balance is 68% calcium, 12% magnesium, 3 to 5% potassium, and then there's about 13 more minerals that we manage, and these are them. What is really important is ratios are important, so the relationship to potassium to phosphorus, the relationship to calcium to magnesium, and then I withheld from putting up the ideal balance, which you can find in these books over here, and you can go more into depth in that, because with this ideal balance is also an understanding that you can't manage for these minerals all at once. There are some minerals, when we get into copper, the amounts of copper, if you were to put on too much copper sulfate, you could actually you could hurt your soil in the short term, and for 5 to 10 years if you did too much. So there's certain minerals we have to go slow. So if we have a deficiency, sometimes we can't get there overnight, and we have to manage for a balance over time. So what are some mineral sources? We're not recommending dolomitic limestone. That's the limestone that has a 2 to 1 calcium to magnesium ratio. We're recommending the calcium carbonate because a lot of times our soils already have luxury amounts of magnesium or close to enough magnesium that when you add in more magnesium, you are getting the soil out of balance, and then another plant is going to come in to help mitigate that balance. So you get these plants, a lot of times a low calcium plant is bittersweet. Bittersweet, when you start to change that calcium magnesium relationship, bittersweet finds it less hospitable. Dandelions, we'll see. I'll save that. So some of the other ones, a great mineral source around here, rock phosphate, because you have a phosphorus source and a calcium source. And what I want to say about all these minerals is that there's a certain percentage of the mineral that you want to manage for, and then there's other minerals. And so there's a little bit of a balancing act to decide what you need to get your soil into health. Sulfomag has a sulfur component, a potassium component, and a magnesium component. Pretty self-explanatory. Potassium sulfate has a potassium and a sulfur component. So in the Northeast, a lot of things that leach are the anions. So you have sulfur. A lot of our soils are deficient in sulfur. Nitrate nitrogen. A lot of our soils don't have enough nitrate nitrogen. Boron, which is a trace element we need, and that gets leached easily because our soils, the rain is leaching the anions. And then yeah, there's many more. So real quick, we're just going to look at nitrogen. Nitrogen is your system. There's a lot of factors involved. If you're an organic grower, those two nitrogen inputs that I had on the last slide you can't use. You can't use ammonium sulfate or calcium nitrate, but they can be used very judiciously to have a benefit. So there's nitrate nitrogen and ammonium nitrogen. And nitrate nitrogen is your growth nitrogen, and your ammonium nitrogen is your fruiting nitrogen. And so almost all the organic nitrogen sources are ammonium sources. And so when we get plants that are going to seed quicker than we would like, or we get plants that are going to seed too quick, that is a fault of ammonium. A lot of times what we want to manage is this nitrate nitrogen up until a point when we want the plant to start to reproduce, and then we can add in the ammonium nitrogen. Organic, what I want to say with conventional farming is that a lot of times we're putting nitrogen out there by itself. And actually, you know what, I'm going to say that. We're going to speak to that a little bit later. And then organic matter, just by its very nature, has a nitrogen component to it. We can base our nitrogen needs on specific crops. Cover crops add nitrogen to the system. The history of the growing conditions will determine how much nitrogen we need, how active our biology is, and then there's a soil test we can do to see where our nitrogen is at. Up here we had our chickens hammer down a cover crop in our greenhouse. We shallow tilled it in, let that material break down. We get the added benefit from our chicken and duck manure, and then we can plant the crops in there. Okay, so real quick, what kind of soil test do I need? How do I do it? I recommend, I use the Melic 3. It's a strong acid soil test, and so it tells you everything that's in your bank account. But there's also some great stuff happening with these weaker tests, the CO2 and the paste, and that tells you how much cash you have on hand. So the paste test is telling you what's floating in solution right around the root zone, and the bank test, the Melic 3 or the Morgan, is telling you what is totally surrounding your clay component. So by using these two, they're both about $30 tests, we can get a better idea of what we need to do. So a lot of times what will happen, I think it's the next, oh no, it's not the next slide. A lot of times what will happen is we'll get a beautiful soil test with the bank account. It'll say, wow, the soil has this great balance. It should be growing amazing plants. But then when we take the paste test, we find out that there's no cash in hand. There's no minerals that are available right then, and that might be a problem with biology. Microbiology is not performing as well, and we haven't broken down this, we haven't gotten into this bank account to release some of that money to our plants. So we can do that with biological stimulants, we can do that with some enzymes, we can do that with some microbe food. Okay, so UMass uses the SLAN approach for balancing minerals, and which is actually not a balance. And then what Albrecht used was the basic cation saturation ratio. And the way I like to think about it is this is a sufficiency model right here. SLAN is a sufficiency model. So you need, if you have a really weak system, you can't just balance it and the system will have enough to do what it needs to do. So the way to think about this is like if you have a baby and you have an adult, and if you just reduce the amount of food proportionally that adult eats and you gave it to a baby, that might not be enough nutrition for that system. The baby actually needs, comparable to us, a lot more nutrition. It needs, it's feeding every 3 hours. It's really nutrient dense food, and so what sometimes we have to do is we have to use this UMass approach on these systems that are really weak. So the lawn that was just put in place in the development community with very thin soil, that is a baby. That doesn't have much nutrition. And so when we start to add nutrition in, if we just do the balanced approach and we say, oh, you're only this big, you only need this percentage of calcium and this percentage of magnesium, you're not going to grow. You're not going to grow plants. You have to add in what the sufficiency level says, and then when you get the system up and running, when you get it to a gas tank of around 10, which is the cation exchange capacity you want, then you can start balancing the minerals. So you manage strategically until you get it healthy enough. The problem with managing all the time in the strategic model is you can get things out of balance that way. So if you always follow UMass recommendations and they say, put on 4,000 pounds of calcium per acre every year, you're heading in the right direction. The problem with that is when you do get the system up and running and you're now adding more than you need, you're getting things out of balance. And so you need to come back to this balance, the way of balancing minerals. So we have my nephew, and he is not a system strong enough yet to get the balance. And this system, this is a lawn in Pittsfield I worked on, and this was a definite learning curve because I learned this firsthand. You can't just add the balance. You can see from this picture how much spacing there is in between the grass and the clover. There's a lot of dirt exposed. Here you can see my aeration attempts. And what I did was I mixed the minerals in with compost and I spread it out there and I got almost no response. And I did a lot of work and I was like, this is the before picture and this is the after picture. And so what I learned from this is that I need to go even slower. I need to spoon feed this system. And for those systems that are just starting out, we want to spread our nutritional budget out over a longer period of time. We can't put it on in the fall like most of the farmers or gardeners in here can, because most of you already have a system that is healthy. You have enough organic matter to support the mineral balancing, but just be aware that there are systems out there where it requires a different approach. And I found this on the internet. This is I used this lab, Logan Labs, and this woman was basically speaking to what I was just telling you about. She has a beautiful soil test over here. Yeah, it's pretty good. And she said it was not growing like she hoped. And then when you look at the PACE test, which tells you how much money you have, she doesn't have barely anything in solution that the plant can use to grow. So we just change management. We add things in that the plant can get right away. For the super high-end growers, like the orchardists around here, we can do a leaf test and we can find out exactly what has gotten into the plant, and then we can manage for deficiencies that way. So some of these larger farms who have a larger fertility budget and their decisions, their fertility decisions have larger impact. They want to know exactly what's going on in there. I know Windy Hill Farm actually does leaf tests, and they're trying to get that calcium level up, which is just really hard to get it up to around 3%. So how do you soil sample? What you do is you pick an area you want to sample. You make sure there's not any parts that are drastically different from other parts, and then use your judgment, because this area is going to have a different fertility profile than the rest of the field. Anytime you have standing water or you have a history of something else happening, like you had cattle stocked in an area hard, or it's around a barn. So you pick an area, you randomly sample 12 to 15 samples. Something like this is nice, but you can use a digging spade, whatever you can do to get a 6-inch random sample. You mix it all in a bucket, you save about 2 cups of it, that looks more than 2 cups to me, and you send it away to the soil lab of your choice, and Logan Labs is the lab I recommend, but everyone can choose a different lab. Okay, so how does availability work? So you have the microbes in the soil. They use enzymes to release energy, minerals, and minerals from food. So basically, you have this microbe that has a tool. It looks like a pick. when you strike it into the molecule you're trying to break apart, whether this is a fatty acid molecule and you have lipase to break apart the enzyme that breaks apart those bonds, and then you release energy, the microbe bathes in that energy, and then you have more to be then broken down. And there's microbes for every molecular structure, and there's enzymes for every molecular structure. So you need the workers and you need the tools. And what happens with kind of an anecdote here, what happens with PCBs is that the microbes are the chlorine that surrounds those PCB benzene rings stops the microbes from being able to produce the enzyme they need to break apart that organic compound. So some of the more cutting edge PCB remediation technologies are giving the enzymes, manufacturing the enzymes, spraying them out over the soil in large quantities, so then you have the microbes that have the tools, which weren't shut down by that chlorine surrounding the PCBs, and then they can start to break down the river. And that is a more in the environment a way of breaking down instead of doing all this work which they're talking about and bringing it somewhere else and putting it on someone else's property. So that is a great way to think about availability. And particle size matters. So when you have these minerals, if you're putting a rock out there, it's going to take eons for that rock to become available to the plant. But if you're putting a micronized, or even better, a colloidal mineral source that has so much surface area for the microbes to work over, and it's really small, that nutrition can get in the ground quickly. One thing to think about is bacteria are 5 to 1 carbon to nitrogen. Protozoa are 30 to 1 carbon to nitrogen. So where the soil food web people have a strong leg to stand on is they're saying you optimize that biology, you get free energy out of the system. And how does that work? So every time a protozoa spends its whole day eating bacteria, and because its ratio is 30 carbon to 1 nitrogen, if, say, it eats, 50 of those, there's a lot of extra nitrogen that's available because to get converted to that 30 to 1, it's pooping out all this extra nitrogen, and that is a benefit to your plant. That's how plants work with the system. So I propose you optimize those minerals, you optimize the design, you optimize the permaculture. You can put the bugs in there, but without you building it, they won't come. So you need those microbes. Oh, and one last thing I wanted to bring up is what are these humates? You may have heard about these as the kind of the equivalent of biochar, the soil and human supplement that is just amazing. It has no problem it can't fix. And so humates are the level above brown coal. So they're actually, I think, considered a brown coal. They're the last biologically available layer of carbon compression. So you have the black coal, which doesn't have a biological relationship. There's a toxicity component to it. And then above that, in the geological breakdown time, you have humates. And humates, when you look at them, they're just like this incredible carbon coral reef of being able to hold minerals and to let these microbes in. And so a lot of detox supplements you'll see in people will say there's a charcoal component, a humate component, or a fulvic component, and humates and fulvics are derived from, it's basically a waste process. You have the people going after the coal and they're getting this other stuff that's not as valuable out of the way. But it's actually great when you add nitrogen to the soil, if you're just adding straight nitrogen in a lot of conventional programs, you have no carbon to nitrogen ratio. So to get to this soil balance of 30 to 1, your soil has to cannibalize its own home, which is the carbon, to buffer that nitrogen that's been added into the ground. So if you can buffer your inputs before you add them in, then conventional inputs become less toxic. And so the same thing can be done with the key ingredient in Roundup. You can buffer it with a humate, and then you don't need half as much to spray on your land. Same with the conventional fertilizer. When you buffer them with, you buffer that high nitrogen fertilizer with a carbon source like a humate, you can reduce your soil destruction. When we look across the plains and we see that carbon is dropping every year, a big part of that is that we're putting in this high nitrogen compound. The tillage is one side of it, but the high nitrogen takes the carbon with every, it takes more than one carbon. It takes 30 carbon for every nitrogen you put in to maintain that balance. So you're actually eating the home, the microfluid. One thing I just thought was interesting is that I looked at the ingredients for this one ecological farming product called microfood, and I was amazed at how many layers of nutrition and biostimulants and natural growth promoters are in this microfood. And I would like to see if they sprayed this microfood on PCV soils to see if it could break that down. Because you see it's got available minerals. Chelated means it's attached to something organic. Calcium, amino acids are in a biologically available nutrition form. When those bodybuilders take amino acids, that's like instantly available. Fatty acids right here. You break them down, you get energy. A lot of fungus like to play with fatty acids. You have vitamins, plant extracts, biostimulants, growth promoters, over 70 minerals, complex carbohydrates, and enzymes, all that in one product that you're looking to stimulate the biology in your soil. Okay, how does balanced land help apply minerals? Small areas you can just do by hand. Machine, you can do larger areas. It's similar to how the standers drive around. You see the standers spreading. So if you have a big pasture, you can work with that technology, which is everywhere. Mark Shepard, who I brought up before, the permaculture guy, he does use some minerals. He does free choice to his animals. And so that's offering the animals clays and seaweeds and these humates, and they can self-select what they need based upon how they're feeling that day. And cows are pretty amazing that way to know what they need. There's some setups that look like a cafeteria-style mineral box, and the cow can select what mineral it needs that day, and then it's pooping it out on your pasture, and it's spreading it for you. So you're getting the nutrition out there. This is my little foliar sprayer, and so I do a lot with that, getting nutrition right in. Compost, this is, I worked with Gary O'Brien because he's got the big machinery, and I ordered compost from a place up in Dalton. I'm forgetting their name. Yeah, Holiday Brook Farm. And so I had Holiday Brook Farm deliver a tractor-trailer truck of compost, and then I mixed some mulch in there, and I mixed all the minerals my soil test for a landscape project said I needed, and then I had Gary O'Brien's guys mix it all up, and then I worked with them to spread it, and so that's my fertility happening on a landscape project. And some of the conventional people are mixing minerals just inline along, just next to the seed, not touching the seed, but just close to it. So if they have a very small budget, you can figure out ways where you're just putting enough in there to grow the crop for that season, and maybe as you make more money over time, you can add in a little bit more. And then irrigation. If some of you guys have irrigation already set up, there are soluble minerals that you can put right through the irrigation, and that is a very cost-effective way because a little bit goes a long way with irrigation. So the economics, like I said, around $30 for soil test. UMass is about 7 or 17, but I don't feel it's as in-depth as the ones that I get. So you need a little time to read it and calculate the minerals. There's a knowledge component, access, spreading, that takes time, and equipment sometimes. An average price for an amendment that you're going to need is calcium carbonate. It's just calcium and carbonate, and that's $300 a ton. That would be an average of what you might need for an acre. And then, how can we not afford to do mineral balancing when it is proposed that less than 10% of the genetic expression of our crops is currently being expressed? So, if you figure you're getting great yields now, if you're only getting 10% and you're not mineral balancing, just imagine if you were getting much more. And there's
I could offer some stories on that secondhand, but one that I like is that corn. A lot of times we see corn as just a single stalk, but when some of these growers are getting the nutrition in where the corn actually starts tillering, like you'll see with rye or some of the smaller grains. So you'll get you know, 4 cobs per plant, and then you'll have or 4 cobs per stalk, and you'll have 4 stalks coming out of that corn. That and then, so what happens? What are some of the things that we see? So this is a picture I took over at Julie Rawson's farm, who I talked about earlier, and this was Lance Porter growing her mescaline patch, and I love that the mescaline is getting. I mean, it's kind of mean because of Lance Porter, but that it's getting hit by aphids, and this is definitely not a healthy weed. And the mescaline patch is doing amazing. And so when you get those minerals up, you start to see things happening different. You know, it's not so much of we were kicked out of the Garden of Eden and meant to live amongst thorns and brambles, where we can actually be stewards and co-create this Garden of Eden here. And so this was just over a summer. In the early part of the summer, I worked on a landscaping project where I mineralized one area and didn't mineralize another area. And you can see the expression of the garlic mustard. This is a beautiful garlic mustard with nice spacing between the leaves and full expression of the leaves. And then you see this garlic mustard that the spacing starts to be reduced, the leaf size starts to get smaller. So basically what happens is you manage for a balance where these plants that have broader needs are ornamental plants and are plants that have been bred for fruit that is ridiculously larger than their wild relatives. Then the nutrition is built into the system that those plants can express themselves, and these guys, the pioneers, they find another place to live. And you can see this almost megalithic dandelion compared to just a much smaller dandelion, which that doesn't look unhealthy. But dandelions are a great one. Calcium carbonate and rock phosphorus will oftentimes just be enough added lightly to get your dandelions to take off. And I've got some great books over there that go over every weed, so if you didn't want to go into the soil testing realm and you just wanted to experiment with looking at the weeds and then managing the soil based upon which weed is growing, you can look at what that book says about the weed, and then you can see which weed you have and know what your mineral balance is based on that. So, okay, so how do in the winter time, I've had a little bit extra time to really get into books and figure some stuff out. And so some of the interesting stuff is how insects see inflammation. So insects are Mother Nature's cleanup crew. And so if there's a plant not fit to reproduce, the insects or the disease are going to come in and recycle it and hope a better balance builds from that rubble. And so what you see here is you see this is an infrared picture of 2 different plants, and this plant is showing a lot of inflammation, a lot of infrared signal coming off of there, and whereas this plant is not showing much. And what happens with plants is with insects, the smelling model of how insects attack your plants is outdated. What happens is they send up these pheromones into the air from a plant that they found that is emitting infrared radiation, and those pheromones act as little satellites to bounce that infrared information off further to other insects. That's why when you have a strong wind and you still have insects coming to attack your plants from the wind side, it's not a scent-based molecule that's floating along the wind. It's an infrared-based transmission. And so, if you want to learn more about this, Phil Callahan's books are amazing, and they are written by a scientist who is broadly disciplined, so he has many passions, and they all come together in his books. And Tom Dykstra, entomologist out of Florida, I had the benefit of hearing talk, and he took his education to the apex of entomology. And when he started to talk about that this smelling model wasn't working anymore in his science, they threw him out of school. And so then he teamed up with Callahan, and they're rewriting how insects sense plants. And so basically what it comes down to is we are managing for health. You know, this is the same in people. You know, inflammation, they say, is the foundation of all disease. And you get disease because you're inflamed. And so we're managing for health. That inflammation goes down. You get the plant living in nature. Okay, and this guy, this is an Amish farmer who stole away from his community to read books and figure out how health works. And he was a conventional Amish farmer, and then he found out that there's a way closer to organic, not completely organic, that he can manage for health in his growing programs that takes things to the next level. And so John Kemp in the consultant farmer world is considered a soil prodigy. He's about 26 years old now, and he's read all the books, and he's one of the most down-to-earth and knowledgeable speakers. And he came up with this pyramid, which basically says, you know, when plants are just producing simple carbohydrates, they are not going to be attacked by fusarium, verticillium, and alternaria. The next step up is when you get them producing complete proteins, then you start to have less of these bugs. Excuse me, the cabbage lopper, the leaf miner. When they start producing lipids, which are fats, then you start getting less of these funguses. The apex is the beetles. The beetles are the hardest. So what I hear from most people are, I've got, and myself included, I've got that tiny little beetle, flea beetle. And what happens is when you get the plant health up to this level, not even beetles attack. And there's some great stories about you can actually get some insects to explode, but most of the time insects they won't even eat something that they can't digest. Because when you get up to these levels, their digestion system just doesn't work anymore. They can only take so much sugar, and so complicated are these lengths of sugar that if they take them in, they don't have a way to off gas, and they ferment, and they blow up. So they don't eat them. They know not to eat that. And these phytoalexins up here are, like I told you, like the essential oils, the great smell, those which some people do use as insect deterrent. Okay, so what do we have to tell what's going on in season? Well, how do we know the health of our plants? That is the biggest one. You all have been around plants all your life, and you know what a beautiful plant is, and you know when you start to see things that the plant is doing. So that's the number one. You go out there and you see what's going on. And then we have this thing called bricks, and a bricks is basically your tongue. So that's another one you can take home. How sweet something is. So the plants produce simple sugars. That's what they're built out of. And so we can take something from the wine industry, and we crush a little bit of the plant material, so the leaf, not an area that translocates sugars, because that'll throw things off. So you take a little bit of the leaf, and you squeeze a drop on this thing called a refractometer, and the refractometer was invented to tell the percent sugar, roughly the percent sugar of grape juice in the wine industry, so they know how quality their grape juice is. And you put it on there, and if you get your plants to around 12, they can't be attacked by insects. Insects can't decompose plants with the bricks above 12. And so that means you're optimizing the health of the plant. This gives you an idea of where your plant is at all times, and the only plant that I've ever tested that was around 12 was nettle. So a lot of times you spend a lot of money trying to get these heirloom plants up to optimum, and it's not easy because it takes time for those minerals to become available, and even with all this foliar nutrition, to get them up around 12 is really hard. But they were some really healthy nettle plants. And then so bricks has a tongue component. You know, it's delicious when plants start to become delicious.
maybe the kid wasn't wrong to want that sweet food. Where our taste buds have evolved to identify sugar because there was a long time when that was our best way of finding out where the nutrition is. So if we're out there as hunter-gatherers and we're trying to define which food is the best, one thing we can rely on is that when we taste it, if it's got that high sugar component, then we know the nutrition is being built into the plant. It's a high-performing plant. It has all the pieces to perform. And you only get that high sugar level if the plant has all that mineral nutrition. Now, there's been talk that, maybe someone's going to GMO engineer a plant that has high sugar levels, but I'm sure that the bricks is just a window into what's happening, and you can mess things up by having too much simple sugar put into the system. Plant sap pH is pretty interesting. The products that I carry, Taimyo, were founded by a man named Bruce Taimyo, who passed away recently, and he was kind of like a layman scientist, and then a little more so. He did some amazing things with plant health, and he found out that you can measure the sap pH of a plant, and you can get an idea of where the health is. So that same 6.4 that we manage for in the soil, we manage for in the sap pH, and some health coaches actually talk about that is the same pH you want to manage in your urine when you first wake up, which is a whole nother talk of why you want your pH to be right around 6.4, not too alkaline and not too acidic. And what happens when you get your plant sap pH right around that 6.4 is above 6.4, you're susceptible to insect attack. Below 6.4, you're susceptible to disease. And it's just one little window in on what is happening within the plant that allows us to manage for health. Then you can use a temperature gun. These are pretty cheap, and you can shoot it right at your plant, and you can tell if your plant is basically inflamed. You can tell how well that plant is performing because your ambient temperature should be 10 degrees less than the surface of your plant. So you can shoot these guns right on the surface of your plant, and it should be 10 degrees cooler than the ambient temperature on a hot day. And a lot of times when you'll shoot a plant that looks like this puny little weak plant, it'll be 10 degrees over. It's boiling, and it's not being able to process photosynthesis correctly. And then potassium meter. Now we start getting into meters that take away the guesswork entirely, because that one leaf testing chart I showed you, you want calcium, potassium, and I'm blanking on the other one. Nitrogen, sorry. Calcium, potassium, and nitrogen, all right around 3%. And so you can then use a combination of the potassium meter, the Brix meter, and the plant sap pH meter to tell exactly where your plant is. And then if your plant is missing one, you can add in that nutrition. And so maybe that's beyond the scope of our growers right here, but this grower is a 1,500 acre organic grower that I visited up in Canada, and this is soybeans right here. And if you look closely, you can see the leaves were hit by hail, but the plants aren't skipping a beat. I was surprised how healthy they did look for having got hit by hail not too long ago. And this farmer does detailed in-season testing of his crops, and then when the crops are getting low, he makes sure the nutrition is there. And this was our garlic this year, which I did a phenomenal amount of foliar sprays trying to get our garlic up there, and it was probably one of the biggest ones, but I was proud of it. And then this was kind of like a sideshow experiment in corn. I was trying to see what I could do with corn, and I pushed a few things a little too hard with some of the sprays, but when that kind of happens sometimes when you have this area right in front of you and you kind of want to play with it every day and see what you can do. But this corn was like maybe 13 feet tall. It was pretty tall, but it was and this is me, so trying to take a picture to show you how tall it was, but it didn't fill out too good. And so there's different kinds of filling out energy, which I hadn't figured out from that picture. Yeah. And then this was I would wake up
best times to do foliar sprays early in the morning, so I'd wake up around 4 and I'd have my foliar spray mixed up the night before, and I'd spray my parents' fruit trees to see how I could build nutrition. And they've never been soil mineral balanced, so this is like hitting these historic plants from out of nowhere with this nutrition. And one of them was a pear tree, and a branch broke, but I had been spraying all these humates and mineral nutrition around the outside, and I noticed that it wasn't breaking down like normal fruit would afterwards. It was just dehydrating on the vine. There was nothing coming in and finishing it off. And there's still, in the winter, these things hanging from the tree. So I climbed. I mean, it could have just been the way the branch broke and the way it dried perfectly, and that maybe happens everywhere, but I thought it might have something to do with all the sprays I was doing on it too. And then these are two. This electrical box was just loaded with Canadian thistle. That thistle that's just like you pull it and it snaps and the runner is in the ground and you can't do anything with it. And we showed up here and I wasn't too much into mineral balancing when I first started working here, so we did a cardboard sheet mulching, and that basically added organic matter, so we just smothered it at first. I wasn't going to get involved with fighting with weeds. And then I looked in that book and it said thistles are all low calcium weeds, and so I just spread some calcium carbonate and really heavily mulched and just let earthworms go crazy. And a lot of times I would just cut these grasses and like lay down their clippings down there, so it would act as more mulch, and there's no more Canadian thistle there. The balance is better and the grasses are doing great. And then this area, again, I did a mineral mix into aged sort of wood chip mulch, and so far this project has had very little weeds. You come there and there'll be a weed here, a weed there, a weed there, and that is sometimes hard to get across to, if you're doing landscaping, to the client to be like, okay, now you're not going to pay so much in maintenance over time. When we head towards this balance, we are using more of our knowledge than our backs to deal with these projects. And we'll see. I'll be working on that project this year. And then warning, just looking through, only one lens is dangerous. Some of you also know me. I'm into electromagnetic health, and a lot of times I feel like our biochem approach to looking at health leaves off the another side of health. So if you're just looking about molecules, you're going to only find answers in molecules. But when you have a more broad background, you can start to see that a lot of things are interrelated. And something really interesting that just came out about photosynthesis is that for years, I have one book over there. It's the Mineral Nutrition on Plants Handbook. It's the big book. Like no one ever reads it. But one part in there says there's a missing step in photosynthesis, and it's called compound X. But they never figured out what compound X was, and they just printed the book with compound X happens before ATP. And it just came out recently what compound X is. It's not a compound at all. It's not two molecules put together. It's more of something along the line of physics. So it's the shape of the plant harnesses light, and that creates basically free energy coming from the environment. It's like a semiconductor, whereas semiconductor is not based on ions and molecules. It's just beautifully designed coherently with our parameters of how the world works and magnetism and electricity, and electricity just glides right across. It's just like how a plant works. So here's my little shout out, biochemistry. You need some fun physics, some art, some design, some lived life, and to get out there and look at things. And then I wanted to just quickly talk about Mark Shepard because he had such a big impact on me. And this is his farm. It's a 100-acre farm in Wisconsin. And he has up to like 15 layers of crops. There's crops on top of crops on top of crops. So we'll have like nut trees and fruit trees and pigs coming through and sheep and goats and chickens, and they're all layered, and they're not all working perfectly. But what he bases it on is that when you have more of these layers, you can, so if you have 7 or let's say 10 layers per acre, where you normally just what he has also cut is he's cut, have it here, the inputs. So he has such an ecosystemally designed, this is designed so it captures water. So he has it so well designed with the ecosystem in mind that he doesn't need many inputs. He's not out there spraying his fruit trees. He's not, the only mineral balancing he's doing is he's feeding his cattle the minerals so they can poop them out over the land and have that area be balanced. And some of the things he says is you observe and you accept. You know, you observe nature and you accept what the lesson you're being taught, and you try to act accordingly. And know your biome, know where you're from. He tells some amazing stories about what our biome was before settlers were here, like chestnut trees 8 to 10 feet in diameter, sugar maples 3 feet in diameter, 100 feet tall as understory trees to those chestnut trees, and then so narrow in those forests that it was hard for horses and carts to get through. So not really widespread out like that silvopasture I showed you. So just think about that when we're trying to grow a system that is not exactly lined up with nature, why we might have a hard time, because that's where, the amazing potential of our land is. Maybe we should start thinking about how to get to that place as opposed to what Mark Shepard would say, when you baby a system, you really have to take care of the system. And then he had a really good point. He said, all our job is just ask how alive something is, and then how do we make it more alive? If you look at something, how alive is it? And love it if it's really alive, and figure out how to incorporate it, even if it's called, invasive. Our invasion theory. Sometimes we say these guys are bad, but if they are living to the health metrics that we set, like soil building, mineral balancing, if they are playing within those parameters, maybe we should think of a different way to call them. And in the thing, here's my galweed experiment. I planted it in a freshly tilled greenhouse, and then over the season it grew a couple leaves here, but you can see this leaf, that might be a phosphorus deficiency, which this soil test was not deficient in phosphorus, it had great phosphorus. So when you get that balance up, then these pioneers start to have deficiencies. And towering over this plant was like a tomato plant this big, and so that tomato plant, then it wasn't safe. It fell over this plant. I forgot about it, and I shredded up everything in the greenhouse and then shallow tilled it in to let it digest into the soil. And I forgot about this, and it didn't show back up. And many of you know, if you forget about galweed and you till it up, you usually have more galweed. And then just some quick anecdotes. Cows will eat paint. So if you don't have enough calcium in your pasture, sometimes paint is made with calcium carbonate as the filler. And when your cows are eating your paint, that is telling you that you should probably get them better pasture to eat. They're smart. Blueberries can also shine in balanced soils. And if any of you guys have time, look up Bob Wilt in Oregon. There's a blueberry grower in Connecticut who's learned from Bob Wilt, and he's putting into place the same practices. Bob Wilt has blueberries that big growing on 7.2 pH soils, but they're just so beautifully balanced that they have all those things blueberries need. Like blueberries in acidic conditions, when we saw that pH scale, they need manganese, they need iron, and they need aluminum. And those are all available at low pH, but you can make them plenty available in a balanced situation. And then one of these cool things is nutrient balanced food doesn't spike blood sugar. It's not a simple sugar. So there's stories of these diabetics who will eat this nutrient balanced food, like Rainier. There's one about a guy who eats Rainier cherries, and he just sits down and eats Rainier cherries. So many Rainier cherries, and he's like, I found the Holy Grail. This variety allows me not to be diabetic. I can now eat all the cherries I want. And so he went to the store and he got another Rainier cherry variety, and he just went into, after 3 cherries, went into diabetic shock, because it wasn't the variety, it was that the nutrition in those cherries that he was eating with that consultant was built in there. And then tomato blight is a nice one. It's a potassium deficiency, so the blight will colonize the lower leaves, and basically what the plant is doing is the plant's goal is to reproduce, so it's sacrificing potassium from the lower not balanced anymore. And so it decomposes the lower leaves, and a lot of times we burn these or we throw these away when really we should probably just put more potassium at that point, or before. And then another anecdote was there was a consultant who was telling the head of the Tomato Growers Association in California that, you head in this direction, we can improve your shelf life, we can improve your taste, we can improve the nutrient density of all your fruits, we can, people would love it. And he said, get out of my office. And he's like, I don't want any more tomatoes not rotting on shelves. He made more money by selling, having people just buying fruit that's going to rot and then they replace it. So why would he want to build this nutrition in? So it comes from people like us who are concerned about our health and who want this built into the food. And that's it. So if you guys have questions.
Do you see your consulting going more towards organic or towards conventional or a shared combination of both?
Well, that's a great question. So the question was, do you see going towards organic or conventional or a combination of both? And it's a combination of both.
Leaning towards which side?
Leaning towards, well, it actually starts to become its own entity. So when you start to become an ecological farmer, you look at any input and you say, is this getting me towards the health that I want and the health of the system? So a lot of organic inputs are great and amazing and raw and just great for biology, but one thing where organic falls over is that it's basically saying organic is safe from toxins, but it's not saying the nutrition is built into the system. And in the organic community, this has been talked about a lot. And back in the day, in Georgia, they actually, like in the 90s, they used to make mandatory adding missing minerals from your organic farm, and they don't make that mandatory anymore. So organic is really safety from toxins, which is in this world we know there's tons of toxins, but it's not saying that the nutrition is built into the food. And a lot of times when you get the nutrition into the food, no matter if it's organic or conventional, it has a big potential to it. And a lot of times you can't get the nutrition in if you're using harmful conventional inputs. So it kind of weeds itself out. It's a great question. Dave.
You mentioned something about how the structure of the soil affects mineral availability and the biological mineral availability matrix.
Mm-hmm.
Could you say something about how mineral balanced soil affects structure?
Great. So that is a great question. So what Dave just asked was that how, when we get this balance in place, when we can do a lot to physically manage the soil to allow these minerals to become more available. But what Dave is hinting at is that there's also a way that we can manage soil just with the mineral balance to create the physical structure. And if you remember that slide I had over here with the root, and then there was a little clay particle with minerals surrounded around the outside, there's minerals of varying size. So if you're growing on a clay soil, a lot of times you have a compaction issue. And when you get a big cation in there, like calcium, it has the biggest atomic radius, it pushes apart those clay platelets, and you get what is called flocculation. And so that you actually get more air into the system. And so working within the chemistry and optimizing the chemistry has a weird way of optimizing the physical structure and optimizing the biological life too, because then you get life that can actually come in there and live with balanced air and water. No, that's not what you're asking.
No.
Yeah.
Do you rent out your big new sprayer, or do you just operate it?
I operate it, but I would definitely be open to renting it out. Definitely.
You talked about inputs for the minerals. Now, but you also said that there was other components to fertility, which was the microorganisms.
Yep.
But you didn't really talk about anything with other than feeding the microorganisms, but do you bring microorganisms in as an input?
That's a great question. Yes, and when you can offer the total ecosystem circle in your input with little cost, then you're on your way. You're on your way there. So what Dan was leading me to is that if you can put the microbes in with the minerals in an environment that they thrive in, and you put those little enzymes in there, so they got the tools to do their job, then you have a product that is delivering this nutrition the way the ecosystem works. So you can have these. Some people experiment with compost teas. I haven't seen. In my experiments with compost tea, I haven't seen dramatic results, but there's some. You can buy some powder microbes that you can brew up in your compost tea units, and you can spread those on, or you can just get those powder microbes and you can mix them with the minerals, and then you can apply them that way. A great time to add microbes in is when you're planting seeds. So you have a seed that has an intimate relationship with a mycelium or other microbes, and so when those microbes are present right around the seed, right in the beginning, it's like the cow getting the colostrum. It has what it needs to develop. That's a great question.
You mentioned something about either invasive plants or weeds mitigating the soil composition. And what I'm curious is whether they mitigating or when they thrive on it, does it actually change the soil? And why I'm asking is because we are pulling out the weeds. We try to not have weeds. But once we not do whatever you do, and we have certain weeds, for example, that only come on a low pH soil, should we pull them up or should we let those weeds to take that acidity?
I think you're finding an experiment that you got to go do. I've tried leaving as many weeds as possible, and sometimes there's a finite amount of resources too. You know, if you're trying to grow a crop for money, and you need some space for that plant. But there's some really some really innovative ways to work within the system. Like one model, but I didn't talk about here, is called pasture cropping, where in Australia, a guy named Colin Sykes is planting wheat right into the same pasture that he grazes his sheep on. And so the wheat is coming up, and he's not getting what you would normally get from planting wheat in a field. But this is a warm season grass climate down there, so he can plant wheat at the beginning of the season, at the end of the season, and then, like in our southern states, the warm season grass starts to grow. So he's getting a crop of wheat